sort of true. Any other questions about the papers? Probably have already picked the paper, but if you haven't, you should pick something that you enjoy, that you want to know about. It doesn't have to be related to what we're talking about right now. The other question somebody else asked me earlier today was about the timeline for the test, the first test. And what I'm thinking is that you'll get it around 2 weeks from today, so somewhere around October 1st, or maybe even more likely the following Monday. And then you'll have until the 15th to get it back. So that's what I think today. Anything else? Yeah, Jeff?
Just randomly, since you mentioned the midterm, do you have any idea how many questions do you think it may be?
Simple answer is no. Somewhere between 2 and 4 would be my guess. But if it's 2, there'll be bigger questions. Probably about the same amount of thinking and writing. I'm going to put you through one of these in a minute, but I just want to point out that this is about the von Hippel paper, and I don't know, we haven't talked about it a lot in class. On the Blackboard, it's been a big topic of discussion where people have engaged with it. I think primarily is kind of a social phenomenon of disinhibition and older adults saying things that you might think that younger people wouldn't because they're disinhibited. And I thought it would be handy for people to actually see the Stroop test and get a sense of what inhibition, the cognitive phenomenon of inhibition is like. And there's actually 2 ways to do this, one that we'll do here in a minute, and one that either if you're doing this at home in the online class, or you guys might also want to come back to, either the Michigan version or the Nova television version. They're essentially the same thing. Let you do this online, and you get the words like one at a time, and you sit there with your little arrow keys and respond to it. And it gives you a more individualized sense than we'll get in class. What I'm going to ask you to do, we're going to go to the Washington here. And so your task in both cases, there's going to be a word set number 2 in a minute. What I'm going to ask you to do is to respond out loud, at least in a whisper or louder if you feel listen socially. And we're going to go left to right. And your task is to name the colors. Okay? So start it here.
Red, green, blue, yellow, pink, orange, blue, green, blue, white, green, yellow, orange, blue, white, brown, red, blue, yellow, green, pink, yellow, green, blue, red.
Very good. Okay, get ready. We're going to do it again. Okay, now name the colors again.
Green, yellow, white, pink, red.
Oh, that's orange.
Red, orange. Blue, red, yellow, green, blue, green, red, blue,
yellow.
Crap. Green, red, pink, blue, yellow, pink, green,
Okay.
green.
So aside from whatever interference you're getting from your neighbors, so call your attention. I mean, very typical of what happens with these kinds of tasks is that even if you're being accurate, probably especially if you're being accurate, you're slower, and you're sometimes not accurate. And when you are accurate, that internal feeling that you get when you're blocking saying red in order to name the color green, That's inhibition. That's what you're doing. You have this very strongly learned response of reading words, and you have to override that response to do what you're actually asked to do. And what I think is absolutely fascinating about the von Hippel paper is that this predicts people's social disinhibition and tendency to insult people and say things out loud that think they might not have said out loud in the past. Which, I told Bill von Hippel this when I first met him several years ago. I would have bet $20 that it would turn out it wouldn't have correlated at all before we did the study. It's amazing that this works. We failed this one. The ones at home, if you do the others from Michigan or the Nova one from PBS, you do it on keys and it gives you your readout time too. One of the ways I think it's stored is how much longer it takes you to read the same list. If you're doing it on a computer basis, you can get more errors and latency. So this is where we left off last week. We did sensation, getting ready to do speed of processing. The typical story here, anyway, has been for years and years that mostly based on cross-sectional comparisons, actually. And it generally tends to be true, although one can wonder why, that we've tended to not to expect so many cohort differences when you're talking about things like sensation and perception and attention and speed. Although, certainly you could make a case that, in fact, because the world speeds up over time and some of the different focus on doing things very quickly, that you might expect that later born generations would be faster. People that were born before there were automobiles and jets and computer games and such things. We do sort of, we have over time sort of like sped up music, the rate that credits after movies go by.
Yeah, definitely.
And most longitudinal studies, although not there in theory, have also suggested that this is a longitudinal effect as well as a cross-sectional sort of age extreme comparison. Generally speaking, it starts at about age 18. There's a lot of variation by task, but if you average correlations together across task, the average correlation tends to fall somewhere around 0.5. So this is, certainly not perfectly correlated, perfectly linear with chronological age. But not very much is, and it's quite a bit higher than the more typical 0.2, 0.3 kind of correlation. So it's a pretty strong effect. Very consistent across cross-sectional research for at least decades. Think back to the first lecture, if you include rats running mazes, maybe even a century or so of aging research. Again, if you go back to some of the really early studies from the first part of the 20th century, sometimes like the old group is like 40, 45, things like that. And then in a few weeks, we'll see that for a while, people were thinking of things like intelligence as being, certainly process-wise they're different, and these kind of simple reaction time tasks and choice reaction time tasks we're talking about today are somewhat less